Okay, so ready for a deep dive. Today we're gonna take a look at Surah Abasa from the Quran.
Yeah.
And this particular surah, it comes from the Meccan period, and at first glance, it seems like it's about this interaction between Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and a blind man
Right.
who's
Yeah.
seeking knowledge, right? But
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
actually a lot more to unpack here. Like there's all these layers.
Absolutely. It really embodies that beautiful Quranic way of weaving together a lesson for the prophet himself, peace be
Mhm.
upon him, a very personal lesson, and then a message for all of us. This universal message about how we treat each other and
Yeah.
how we think about, the day of judgment and really just the core of our faith.
I think one of the things that struck me right away was the way it starts.
Mm.
Like it's
Yeah.
almost like a movie,
Yeah.
like it sets the scene so powerfully. You get the first two verses and it says, "He frowned and turned away because the blind man came to him." And you're like, "Whoa."
Right away you're drawn in.
You're drawn in. And
Yeah.
there's this tension.
And I think it's so important to keep that historical context in mind because, this blind man, he approaches the prophet, peace be upon him, while he's in the middle of a conversation with these really influential figures in Mecca.
Right, yeah.
People with social standing. And
Yeah.
and the surah doesn't shy away from showing us the prophet's human reaction in that moment,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
It reminds us that even prophets, even those chosen by Allah, they're still human and they have those moments.
Right. Yeah, no, it's such a humbling thing to read, but it
Mm.
doesn't just stop there, right? It
Mm.
doesn't just point out the reaction. It goes on in verses 3 and 4 and says, "What would make you perceive, O Muhammad, that perhaps he might be purified or become mindful and the reminder benefit him?"
Yeah.
And it almost feels like this gentle nudge, right? It's like, "Hey, don't judge a book by its cover. We should be open to everyone's potential."
Exactly. And this idea, it's so central to the Quran, this idea that we can never really know what's happening in someone's heart.
Yeah.
We might see outward appearances, but that doesn't tell us the whole story
Yeah. Yeah.
about their potential for spiritual growth, their capacity for transformation. So judging someone based on those external factors, it can be really misleading.
Yeah, and then it goes on to really highlight that contrast even more, right?
Yeah.
Like in verses 5 through 8, it says, "As for he who is wealthy, you attend to him, and you are not blamed for that. But as for he who comes to you striving for knowledge, and he fears Allah, from him you are distracted." It's like, whoa. It's really driving home the importance of recognizing that genuine,
That sincerity.
yeah, that sincerity and that striving for knowledge.
Yeah. And verse 9, it describes the blind man. It says, being in awe of Allah.
Yeah.
And it's just this simple statement, but it speaks volumes about his true intention.
Yeah, yeah. And then you get to verse 10 and it just hits you with, "But you were inattentive to him."
It's so direct.
Yeah, yeah. It's so direct. It's almost like startling how stark it is.
And I think it leaves us with this really profound reminder that even the prophet, the chosen one, is human,
Yeah.
capable of those moments where we might falter.
Right. And it almost turns it into, I mean, it's obviously about the prophet, but it kind of turns into this
It's a universal lesson.
universal lesson for
Yeah.
all of us,
Mhm,
right? It's
mhm.
like, look, we all have those moments. We all have
Yeah, yeah.
potential biases and blind spots, and it's a call for self-reflection, really.
Absolutely. It's a journey of continuous improvement, It's not like we reach a point and then we're done. It's ongoing.
Right, right. But then the surah takes this really interesting turn. Like in verse 11, it just declares, "But no, indeed, these verses are a reminder." And it's almost like it's saying, okay, let's,
Yeah, yeah. Let's shift gears.
yeah, let's shift gears.
Let's zoom out and focus on the bigger picture here.
Yeah, like the message itself is what's really important.
And that message is about the Quran. It's about its divine nature, its importance, and verses 13 through 16, I mean, they paint this really stunning picture. It says, "It is upon pages held in honor, exalted and purified by the hands of scribes noble and righteous."
Yeah.
I mean, it really emphasizes this exalted status of the Quran,
Mhm.
its purity, its divine origin.
It's so powerful how it just kind of elevates the Quran.
Hmm.
It's like it's almost untouchable in a way. And then it shifts again, right? Like verse 17, death upon the disbelievers, how they turn away.
Right.
And it's just this, it's
Yeah.
very different. It's almost jarring.
It is, and I think, it's important to remember that the Surah, it's not just a story from the past,
Right.
It's also meant to be this very real
Yeah.
and powerful message for those who deny Allah's power and the truth of the Quran.
Right. And it really does.
And what comes next is this incredibly strong argument for belief.
Yeah, like verses 18 through 22, it says, from what thing did he create him? From a sperm drop?
Mm-hmm.
He created him and destined him.
Yeah.
Then he made easy for him his path. Then he causes him to die and puts him in his grave. Then when he wills, he will resurrect him.
Oh.
And it's laid out so clearly. It's almost like
It's systematic.
systematic, yeah,
Yeah.
like a scientific presentation.
It's like, look, this is the human life cycle.
Yeah.
This is how it works. And every stage of it is completely under Allah's control,
Yeah.
from creation to sustenance to death and ultimately to resurrection. It's a reminder that our entire existence is dependent on Allah's will.
And then you get verse 23, and it's this, no, but he has not fulfilled what he commanded him. Like, boom. It's like, okay,
Here's the consequence.
here's the consequence.
We've made the case. You've seen the evidence.
Right.
Now there are repercussions for ignoring Allah's command.
Right, and then it shifts again, right? Which the Surah does
Yeah.
a lot of shifting, which is really interesting. But it goes on to talk about all this abundance.
Right. And it's so vivid, like verses 24 through 32, they paint this picture of rain and plants sprouting up and grains and fruits,
Right, and
olives, dates, grapes, all these gardens. It's like,
it's almost like you could taste it.
yeah, you can almost taste it, right? Like it's meant to evoke this sense of awe, a sense of gratitude for all that Allah provides.
It's a really stark contrast too, right? Because you've just come from this section about consequences and punishment.
Yeah, exactly. And then suddenly you're immersed in this abundance, this
Yeah.
generosity. And it makes you stop and think about all those things that we take for granted,
Yeah.
all those blessings that we just expect.
Right. Right. And then it culminates in this description of the day of judgment.
Mhm.
In verses 33 through 37 are pretty intense. It says, so when the deafening blast comes, that day a man will flee from his brother and his mother and his father and his wife and his children. For every person that day will have enough to make him indifferent to others.
Yeah.
Like even those closest bonds
Yeah.
are broken.
It's a day of such intense fear, such chaos that even those bonds are not enough.
Right. And then there's this incredible contrast, right? Because verses 38 through 42, they describe these two groups. Some faces that day will be radiant, laughing, rejoicing at good tidings. And some faces that day will be covered with dust, covered by darkness. Those are the disbelievers, the wicked. And it's such a powerful image.
It's a picture of ultimate separation.
Yeah.
The finality of that division and the eternal nature of paradise and hell.
So this deep dive into Surah Abasa has really been something.
It has. It's taken us from this personal moment with the prophet
Yeah.
to these universal truths about Allah's power, the reality of judgment, the importance of gratitude.
Yeah.
I mean, it's packed with meaning.
What really struck me though was this imagery. I mean, the way both the provision and the punishment are described. It's so vivid. It's so real. It really makes you stop and think about
It's real, yeah.
the choices that we're making.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Every day and the consequences.
In this life
Yeah.
and the next.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think? Like having gone through this, what kind of sticks with you the most?
I think for me, it's that reminder to constantly check ourselves. To examine our own hearts, our own biases, our own potential for blindness to the needs of others. Because, even the prophet, peace be upon him, was reminded and corrected.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely a call to be more mindful, to be more aware,
Absolutely.
to really think about, are we truly embodying the values that we claim to uphold? And are we open to those who might be different from us, who might come from different backgrounds? Are we extending that same compassion and understanding?
And ultimately, are we truly striving for that radiant face
Right.
on the day of judgment?
That's a powerful image to keep in mind.
It is. And I think, it's something that all of us can reflect on and work towards.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a great place to maybe leave our listeners with that thought, to really ponder, what does it mean to have a radiant face
Yeah.
on that day? And what are the steps that we can take, starting today to make sure that we're on that path?
I think that's a journey worth taking.
Yeah. So thank you for joining me on this deep dive
Thank you.
into Surah Abasa,
Mm-hmm.
and and to all our listeners,
Mm-hmm.
keep reflecting, keep learning, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.